welcome. And today I want to talk about our latest paper, Cross-Chain Arbitrage in the Realm of Blockchain Interoperability. This is a work that we have just finished and actually submitted to archive, and it's on today. Here's the list of my valuable co-authors. And we hope this study will bring some light into this dark forest of cross-chain MEV, because we have studied so far MEV in atomic ecosystems or instances or in singular blockchains, but cross-domain MEV, especially between blockchains themselves, are usually on theoretical studies so far, so we will bring some empirical evidence into this stuff that's actually happening. And I will try to leave some 10 minutes at the end for questions. We have a long session, so it should be fine. Okay, let's start with the motivation. So why do we even care about this stuff? So we know that the blockchain ecosystem is not a monolithic structure where we have a single blockchain and all the activity happens there, but we know that we have different blockchains with different properties like block times, consensus mechanism, sequencing mechanisms, and so on, which then creates this multi-chain ecosystem that we have today. And especially in the last years, because of these inefficiencies in layer 1 networks like Ethereum regarding scaling, so the number of transactions that they execute per second, or in general, the speed of the network, we also have these layer 2 solutions which emerge to scale the underlying layer 1s. And we know that DeFi applications, decentralized finance applications, remain at the forefront of this growth with like daily trading volumes in billions and total value locked again in billions. And we know that what happens is that when we have such finance activity happening, we know that the blockchains can result in states which could create profitable opportunities to act upon. And the canonical example of that are, for example, arbitrage. So like if you see two markets in the same blockchain offering the same assets, but they have price differences, you can buy on the cheap one, sell on the expensive one, and then make profit from the difference. And the nice thing about blockchains is that they can provide atomic execution, meaning that you don't have to take any risk in the arbitrage. So it will happen if it's successful and making you money, and otherwise it will fail, causing you no risk in attempting the arbitrage. And in general, we call all these activities of acting upon profitable states maximal extractable value on blockchains. That's like all the value that you can extract by inserting transactions, sequencing transactions, censoring transactions, and so on. And this concept, although we always discuss it in blockchain context, it's really anything in life. Like you can think it like buying a Taylor Swift ticket before everyone else on Ticketmaster and then selling it 1 week before, and probably you're going to make a lot of profit. Now, because this is a crypto conference, we are interested on MEV and blockchains. And as I said, MEV has been heavily discussed on single chain environments. And then more recently, we also started discussing MEV in cross-domain environments. But mostly, as I said, these studies were either on theoretical level or most recently focused on MEV that you can extract between centralized exchanges like Binance and blockchains. But not necessarily too much activity but too much research has been going on between the blockchains. So MEV that you can extract blockchains. And we have recent studies on the potential value that you can extract. So like by just looking at the states, you can actually come up with a estimation for that, but we have no on-chain evidence of this stuff actually happening. So we had this nice paper back in 2021, I think, called Unity is Strength, that attempted to formalize cross-domain MEV. So to give a super simple explanation, the idea is that if blockchains are these individual domains, then MEV on a single chain is simply the maximum balance increase that you can achieve by doing all the actions that you can do given a certain state. So like given that we are in block 1 million, what can you do to maximize your balance? And then cross-domain MEV is simply this, but now assume that we have multiple blockchains, and they are all on a given state. And then what is the cumulative set of actions that you can do to reach this maximized balance across all blockchains, and assume that they're all denominated in the same numeraire, so we have a common like USD kind of value that we can then try to optimize. So this is cross-domain MEV as a definition. And to put it into an example, if we look into single domain MEV, so a classic single chain arbitrage, we know that like on Ethereum, we have various markets which offer the same assets. So like let's assume we have VET USDC and USDC USDT and USDT VET markets, which you can sell VET for 2000 USDC and then swap to USDT in the same rate and then sell the USDT for 2 VET, making 1 ETH revenue or 1 VET revenue minus the transaction fees for profit, but in general, pretty profitable. And the cool thing about this is that you can do this atomically, as I said, so in a single transaction, you can complete this arbitrage without really taking any risk. And because of that, it's super competitive because pretty much you can go on YouTube right now and find a video explaining how you can do it, copy paste the code, and good luck finding anything because anyone can do this. It's highly competitive, and because of that, the returns are super low unless you're finding a really like exotic arbitrage, maybe involving like 6 hops and weird tokens, which the people can't attempt. Now, this is single chain arbitrage. A cross-chain arbitrage would look like this, where you would have some of the markets on a different blockchain, and still, like, if you have the capability of making a swap on Ethereum, but then also continuing that swap or continuing the arbitrage, say, on Arbitrum, well, then you can actually make profits just like you were making profits with a single chain arbitrage. The main difference here is that you have to let go the atomicity property. And that's because these blockchains, they are not acting together. They are not synchronized in that sense. So yes, you can have your still Ethereum swap transaction going atomically, but it doesn't guarantee you that the Arbitrum transaction is also going to be successful. And this introduces a lot of execution risks because maybe one leg of your transaction could fail and making the whole thing go sideways, or because you need to like make one of the trades first and then send that output to another blockchain, you're losing valuable time. How do you send that? There are bridging solutions, but they have costs associated. And if you're not going to use a bridge, then you have to have inventory on multiple networks, which is then fragmenting the inventory that you have. So this is, again, something more difficult than a cross-chain arbitrage where you will have inventory only on Ethereum, and that's it. And because of all these challenges associated with cross-chain MEV or cross-chain arbitrage execution in general, you can also think it as, well, this then has to be less competitive than our atomic arbitrage because, well, it's much harder to get into this. Like, executing this stuff is much more difficult, and this could then mean that the returns are potentially higher than atomic arbitrage because you don't have to let go that much of the transaction fees to the block builders, to the validators, because maybe you don't have to prioritize your transactions that much. So another question we might ask is that, okay, yeah, we can do these cross-chain arbitrage, but we also know that we can sexdex arbitrage these individual blockchains. So what I mean is that, yes, we can find a price discrepancy between Ethereum and Arbitrum on the same, say, VET USDC pool, but it's potentially more profitable to arbitrage them against Binance than against each other, because with Binance, you have lower fees and potentially deeper liquidity, meaning that you can make even more revenue. So then one might ask, yeah, in that case, why would I attempt even doing cross-chain arbitrage? And in fact, this is the common skepticism we have in the community about, does cross-chain arbitrage actually happen? And one way to counter this would be that blockchain interoperability advanced, we have faster bridging solutions, more secure, we have native bridges of the blockchain protocols themselves, but also we have these multi-chain, omni-chain bridges which enable bridging between various blockchains. So then this might potentially enable cross-chain arbitrage, and this could be like an incentive to do them instead of sexdex arbitraging them. But still, the question is, does anyone actually do cross-chain arbitrage? And in this paper, we show that they are actually getting done. So the methodology, although it's much deeper described in the paper, I will just give a brief overview. So the idea is that we try to find 2-hop arbitrage between these 9 networks that you can see, some L1s and then mostly L2s. We try to like get the blockchains with most DeFi activity happening on them. And then you can see that all these chains have their different ordering mechanisms, block types, mempool types, and if you go deeper, if you try to think about it, this would mean that, like, as an arbitrageur, now instead of being a pro at Ethereum only, you have to optimize for, I don't know, optimism as well, because it has a different mechanism, or Binance Smart Chain, and use maybe the private mempools that Binance has to offer now. And this, again, complicates things. And more broadly, we introduced two arbitrage strategies. That is a sequence-independent arbitrage and a sequence-dependent arbitrage, which I will talk about briefly. But in general, we try to identify these two strategies across these 9 blockchains over a 1-year period from September 2023 to August 2024. So, okay, what are these two strategies? Super simple. The sequence-independent cross-chain arbitrage is the arbitrage where we assume that the arbitrageur has inventory on both networks, and they don't have to bridge the assets from the hedge leg, to the other blockchain to complete the arbitrage. And this is potentially more advantageous because you don't have to wait for the bridging to be completed and you don't pay the bridge costs. But of course, this is again potentially more complex because you need to have inventory on multiple blockchains. The other one is a sequence-dependent cross-chain arbitrage because in this one, we assume that once the swap is done on the starting leg, it's bridged to the other blockchain, and you have to wait for the bridged assets to arrive to complete the arbitrage. So you cannot do the individual steps independently, but you have to comply with the sequence of the things. Whereas in the first one, you can even do this step 2, so like the profit leg before the hedge leg, because you have the assets already. Okay, so let's jump into the analysis results. So from September 2023 to August 2024, we found 260,808 cross-chain arbitrage executed across these 9 blockchains, with a daily activity increasing like 3.2 times from where we start to where we end right now. And then there are some individual spikes, but in general, you see the upward trend. In general, overall, these arbitrages traded 465 million in volume, but of course, take this with a grain of salt. This is potentially a lower bound because estimating profits or in general USD volumes of these individual transactions is quite challenging because they could happen on like any kind of tokens and multiply that with 9 different networks. So actually spotting like the dollar price of these individual tokens are quite difficult. And when we can't do that, then we can't really account for their volume in this total volume. So this is most probably a lower bound. And then what's interesting here is that we found that these arbitrages generated close to 11 million in revenue, and 9.5 million was kept as a profit, and on average, they had like a 67% profit margin. Now, to put this into comparison, the previous studies have shown that atomic arbitrage, so arbitrage that happen on a single chain, usually have a profitability rate less than 10%. And that is because if you don't let go like 90% of your profit revenue, then someone else will, and they will do that arbitrage, and you can't keep profit simply. But with the cross-chain arbitrage, we see that you can keep a lot of your revenue, and that is because, again, not many people are attempting to do this, so you don't have to let go that much of your earnings. The similar thing also applies to SexDex arbitrage. So the same study also claims that SexDex arbitrage can keep up to 65% of their profits, and we think this is because of the similarity of in the nature of these arbitrages. Both of them are much harder to do than a single riskless atomic arbitrage. Hence, the competition is potentially less than these atomic arbitrages. When we look into the individual blockchains which these arbitrages occurred on, we see that the most volume passes through Ethereum with 36%, and the count-wise, like Ethereum, Arbitrum, Base, are all similar. You can see like Base gaining some traction over time. But in general, this is an expected thing because we assume that for these profitable token pairs, Ethereum is usually having the deepest liquidity, and hence, if you want to do like a profitable arbitrage, usually you do it with Ethereum against something. But of course, a lot of activity is also happening on other chains, and we will try to look into like why don't they have that much of a volume. This is another way to show how these chains interact with each other, not interact, but how the arbitrages are distributed. Again, on the left-hand side, you can see that count-wise, for example, yeah, Binance Smart Chain and Arbitrum arbitrages are also prevalent, but if you look into volume and profits, anything with Ethereum is like much more prominent than the other chain pairs. And if you look into the individual pairs, the top 4 pair with most volume and profits include Ethereum in it. What's interesting here is that Binance Smart Chain and Arbitrum and Binance Smart Chain and Polygon have like the second and the third most activity, and yet profitability-wise, or not profitability, but profit-wise in total and volume-wise, they are much lower than Ethereum involving blockchain pairs. And this is because of the tokens that are arbitraged in between them. So we will see shortly that the token pairs that are involved in this cross-chain arbitrage are usually these meme coins or like utility coins, which most of the times don't have that much liquidity behind them. So they are usually arbitraged for really short periods and then never used again. And because of these smaller arbitrages that happen like constantly between, for example, Binance and Polygon, they don't add up to like a lot of volume, and yet the count is too high. What's really interesting is this distribution of arbitrage durations. So what we know from traditional finance is that, like, if you read these famous books, Flash Boys, you will see that these high-frequency trading firms compete for microseconds, milliseconds. And yet, we see that cross-chain arbitrage, yes, like 34% of them take less than 10 seconds, but you see the long tail of the arbitrage duration. So this is like the difference between the last leg and the first leg of the arbitrage. And this is like super unintuitive because like we would expect this stuff to be happening like blazing fast, and yet you see that, for example, Ethereum Polygon arbitrage, the most frequent arbitrage pair, they have like a median duration of, 20 minutes? This is crazy, and we actually find that this is because these arbitrages use the Ethereum Polygon native bridge, which has a really long bridging time. And yet, you see still a lot of them are happening. So how does this happen? This is probably because the tokens involved, they don't have much activity going on, and they are super risky, so people are not even like attempting to hold them. Hence, you can like do a swap on Ethereum, bridge them, and still 30 minutes later, you find a profitable state which you can act upon and complete the arbitrage. And again, this is something conflicting with what we know from SexDex arbitrage, because SexDex arbitrage, say on Ethereum versus Binance, on Binance the prices are getting updated on the order book like every millisecond, and on Ethereum you wait until like the very last second or millisecond to like submit your Ethereum leg of this trade, so that you have like a profitable arbitrage and act like as close to the order book price as possible. But here we see that like that's not the case at all. And again, this is because of the tokens that are involved in SexDex arbitrage versus the cross-chain arbitrage. So these are the 10 most profitable token pairs, and good luck if you recognize any of them. For example, this Omni token is, if you look it up on CoinMarketCap, it's the first layer 0 interoperable supporting token that you can bridge across blockchains, hence the activity on it. And we found like 1,944 distinct token pairs, which is like quite high compared to SexDex arbitrage, which usually happen on like 60 pairs or whatever. And again, this is all supporting the fact that like these cross-chain arbitrages, they are not like a profitable ongoing business that you can always arbitrage NMT USDC pair, but you arbitrage it for some time and then you move on, and good luck with getting rid of your of your inventory you have on that token. This is showing a quite interesting thing. This is the profits that they made from these top 10 token pairs, and you can see that, for example, that Omni Vet pair, it's like it has the spike and then it's pretty much never arbitraged again, and really similar behavior for all these profitable token pairs, again supporting the fact that there is no Vet USDC or wet-wrapped Bitcoin pair that's like constantly arbitraged in cross-chain arbitrage realm right now. If we look into the bridge usage in these arbitrages, so the difference between the sequence-independent versus sequence-dependent arbitrage, we see that like only 32% of them actually use a bridge, and 67% happen without a bridge. Maybe this is a limitation of our methodology, but that we didn't detect some bridge operations in between, but still, this gives us a hint that the bridges are right now not efficient enough for supporting cross-chain arbitraging. You see on the right side a time series of like how many arbitrages happen per month per arbitrage type, and you see that the sequence-independent arbitrage, they are increasing actually, but the bridge-using ones, they are almost stale. So again, and you can discuss this further from the point of view of, okay, then if bridges are this slow and like they are not really helping a lot to do these cross-chain arbitrage, then probably the entities that can do these arbitrages are again going to be these like potentially high-frequency trading companies, or those which have like inventory across multiple networks and know how to hedge and so on. So again, the barrier to enter this market is then increasing. And among the ones which used bridge, we saw that at mostly layer 0, which is like an infrastructure that you can also build your bridge upon, is used, followed by native bridge. What's interesting here is that although native bridge had relatively higher costs and longer durations overall, they had a much higher average profit than the multi-chain bridge. And this could be like pointing towards a trade-off between bridge security, like you would trust your high volume arbitrage with the native bridge, and then if you want to do really these like maybe sub-dollar arbitrage, then you would use these multi-chain bridges, which are potentially faster, and yet they always have this risk that like something may happen. Like you can think like an attacker model where the bridge would like simply see your transaction, and then they would complete the arbitrage instead of you on the other network. We didn't look into this, but just saying. Okay, so then what could be some security implications of this stuff? So we found that, so in this seminal paper, Unity is Strength, they say that like the thing that we fear about cross-domain MEV is super traders. That is, these trading shops which can successfully execute like these MEV strategies across multiple blockchains, and because of economies of scale, they simply become more powerful as time passes on, and no one can simply get close to them. And in fact, we found one evidence of that in cross-chain arbitrage. This CA74 guy, he is right now like doing 43% of the whole arbitrage volume, overall like 32%, but you can see he's increasing his prominence. And what this can lead to in the future is that like if this guy is the only one capable of doing these arbitrage, well, then he can simply say, okay, like if we have block builder-like mechanisms on different blockchains eventually, he can simply say, hey, I have this really valuable order flow, like, do you want to access it? This is the price you have to pay me for this, and hence simply have this upper hand, which can then lead to centralization in different networks, which we have seen happening on Ethereum, and for example, like Sextex arbitrage have been shown to be a prominent resource of this centralization. These are all the arbitrageurs that we have identified which conducted more than 1% of the total cross-chain arbitrage trade volume. What is interesting here is that on the second column, you see the type of the entity that we have identified. So by type, we mean, is it an externally owned account, so like issuing transactions always from the same address, or is it a smart contract that they use to conduct these arbitrages? So in atomic arbitrage, even in Sextex arbitrage, which like the blockchain activity happens on a single chain, we usually see smart contracts getting used. So I, as a MEV searcher, develop my own logic, deploy a contract, and then spam that contract, and if it finds an opportunity, it executes, otherwise does nothing. Well, now I ask you, like, how do you do that for cross-chain arbitrage? Like, how do you ensure that when I call a smart contract on Ethereum, it knows that the Polygon price is also profitable, so I can execute this. And because of this lack of synchronization between the blockchains, that you cannot really say to a smart contract right now, like only execute if the Polygon price is also profitable, we don't see a lot of smart contracts getting used for this, but actually EOAs. And you can ask, okay, how does that happen? We think the idea is that you have these off-chain scripts which simply track all the prices on all these markets, and then you can apply your same arbitrage discovery logic on them, like find cycles, whatever, and then simply issue them either simultaneously or issue them via a bridge, like adopt a bridge logic. And this is how you then synchronize the signals coming from different blockchains. And what we find interestingly is that the 4 smart contract arbitrageurs that we have identified, the 2 of them have 9 failing transactions for every 1 successful arbitrage they have. And like we show the top 2 networks that they have these failing transactions on. Both of these 2 guys have them on mainly on Polygon. And this brings up the question, how can we analyze network congestion or failed transactions in the cross-chain realm? So the question is, if we study failing transactions on a given blockchain, like we can, I don't know, look at a smart contract and say, yeah, this guy is interacting with this contract and this contract is producing a lot of failed transactions. But can we really conclude that that contract, the failed transactions, is because that guy is like solely doing an activity on that chain? Or do we actually have to consider this more in a cross-domain environment? Because the failed transactions that I have on Polygon, for example, right now, could be because I'm trying to do an like Ethereum Polygon cross-chain arbitrage, and maybe I have the Ethereum leg secured, but I'm still spamming Polygon to get my transaction in. So I think this requires, like when we model this congestion, we need to consider that the causes of these failing transactions could also be these cross-chain signals that these guys are trying to process. And then finally, we look into the private mempool usage. And for this, we focused on Ethereum. We also looked into bundles at Binance Smart Chain, but didn't find anything there. But on Ethereum, we see that I think the daily number of private transactions increased like 5 times in this time period. And then in general, like you can see like why they are attracted by private transactions, because like you see that they have a higher average block position. And why does this matter? Because like the successful execution of almost all of his strategies depend on acting upon on a state before the others, or like not leaking your strategy in a public mempool. And that's why like using private mempools could be quite advantageous. But now the question could be, okay, like still, yeah, I can have my Ethereum transaction relayed privately, but if my optimism leg is public, then is this still a viable strategy, and so on? And this is a good question. Like right now, we don't have a service which would guarantee you privacy on both Ethereum and say Arbitrum simultaneously. But like with these shared sequencing solutions coming up, maybe they will provide better atomicity and better privacy guarantees, which then can again increase the prominence of these cross-chain arbitrages that we see today. So then finally, discussion. We had 2 items here. The sequencer incentives is one of the big ones. This is also one of the biggest things discussed in this Unity strength paper. That is the threatening thing with this cross-chain MEV, cross-domain MEV, is that the sequencers of these individual networks, the validators of them, whatever, they're in the best position because they simply get to choose what goes into the block and order them, censor them, whatever. Now, if you want to do a cross-chain arbitrage, it's not enough that you get the Ethereum leg going on. You need also the Polygon leg, the Arbitrum leg. And hence, I might have an incentive if I'm a sequencer on, say, Arbitrum to do a deal with like an Ethereum block builder or an Ethereum validator so that I can somehow avoid this non-atomic execution that I have to fight against right now, like minimize the risk that I have. And as we have shown that the prominence of these cross-chain arbitrages are improving over time, we can think that this incentive to collude or like have collusion between these sequencers of different blockchains could improve. And we propose these shared sequencing solutions again to like level the playing field, because if I, as a regular searcher, can simply guarantee that I could have like an atomic execution of my cross-chain arbitrage between Arbitrum and Polygon or whatever, then this would like enable me to compete with these potential sequencers that are colluding and then getting their execution guarantees. So it's a bold statement to say that these sequencers will collude and so on, but still we need these shared sequencing solutions to at least like come over the problems we have with like long bridging times or the non-atomicity right now we have in cross-chain domain. And then finally we propose a risk-optimized strategy for those arbitrageurs who cannot really afford doing a sequence-independent arbitrage, so the ones who cannot have like inventory of these meme coins on multiple blockchains. And the idea is that, say you have inventory on Ethereum, but not on Arbitrum, then you do the Ethereum leg of the trade, and then take a loan on Arbitrum. So of course you have to collateralize something, but that could be in a like more native token, and then get a loan of this risky asset, complete the arbitrage simultaneously, so just like a sequence-independent arbitrage, but then on the first leg, bridge the assets to the other blockchain, and when they arrive, close the loan position. Now you hedge the risk of holding that shitty coin, because you take a loan and immediately finish the arbitrage, and yet still you have the assets to close the loan position because they are coming from the other leg, and you have no rush when they arrive because the arbitrage is already over, and yet still you can do a arbitrage like you are doing a sequence-independent arbitrage. And this is an actual example of that, where the guy arbitrages with wrapped Bitcoin pair and earns 0.5 WET, and then closes the loan like I think 6-7 minutes later. Now this is an interesting example because it's a WET wrapped Bitcoin arbitrage, which is a pair available on SEX, and we think that like to be able to do arbitrage like this on these more popular pairs, you need like liquidity, because like the guy is taking a loan for 2.62 wrapped Bitcoin, which is like nothing. And you need either fast bridging solutions or strategies like this to like hedge the risk of like holding inventory on multiple chains, but simply use loans and so on. Like another way to think about this would be like shorting the asset on a SEX, but then I guess it will be a SEX-DEX arbitrage again. So this is an example of how you can do cross-chain arbitrage while being less exposed to risk. So conclusion, we show that cross-chain arbitrage, yet while there is a lot of skepticism, are actually a reality, but the majority of them don't depend on bridge because of the delays and the costs associated with them. We see that already there is a significant centralization among who does them, and we see that cross-chain arbitrage could actually lead to a different way of network congestion that we should think about. And we finally found that private mempools, as happening in pretty much everywhere in MEV extraction, especially on Ethereum, are getting adopted faster and faster. And finally, we discuss how cross-chain MEV, with its growing prominence, can incentivize transaction sequencing across blockchains to minimize the risk of execution. And finally, we propose a strategy which would be less risky than holding assets on different blockchains. And that will be it. And this is the archive link, super fresh, just 2 hours ago, uploaded. And that's going to be all for now, I think.
10 minutes for questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right. You were first. Hi. First of all, thanks for this great talk and all the research you've done. It's amazing. I have a question about traditional finance markets like the Forex market, where you have all those traders and arbitrageurs who create so many like millions of price indications, and they kind of help the price and the whole market. What is your opinion on the crypto market with those arbitrageurs? Do we need this in the crypto market? Do we need to increase interoperability between chains to make this flourish? And doesn't this only benefit a few super traders like you mentioned?
Yes, I mean, fair point. So yes, we need this because if we are not going to have a single DEX operating across all blockchains, then we're going to have price discrepancies. And to have efficient markets, we definitely need them to be arbitraged so that we don't have price discrepancies. And yet, we have this concentration of who does them. And I'm not sure if this is something inevitable or like if it's something that we want to avoid, because you see similar tendencies pretty much in like every market in blockchains right now. Like if you look into Ethereum, you see that there are only 2 entities building 95% of Ethereum blocks. If you look into the validator set, like you see Lido, Coinbase. So centralization is going to happen. I think the critical question is, what is the danger of that? Yes, centralization in a decentralized world sounds like bad, but besides the meme, is it actually a threat? For example, on Ethereum block building side, the threat is censorship because 2 entities deciding what goes into every block can simply say, we're not accepting any transactions from the area of Zurich. With arbitrage, again, if only like one guy is doing all of them, you can ask the question, okay, if this guy is for some reason out of the game, can someone fill his shoes? That's a valid question. Right now, I would say in cross-chain arbitrage, there isn't that much competition. So if that guy is out of the game, maybe no one will fill his shoes. But in many of the markets we have, like the block builder market, I would bet that those shoes can be filled. So if there is enough competition and if we have solutions against the things we don't like about centralization, I think we are fine with having like, yeah, a centralized market. But yeah, cross-chain arbitrage right now is maybe not one of those markets which we have enough competition.
Hi, thanks. In terms of actually identifying the arbitrages per se, what was, well, two kind of questions. What was the methodology that you went through to actually identify the arbitrages? Was it based on the trades, based on the wallets, or a combination? And secondly, once you've identified those arbitrages, is there actually a strategy which could be a copy trade strategy which could follow those arbitrages available?
Yeah. So the methodology, like you said, it's based on the trade action, so metadata about the trades, like the volume, the tokens involved, and the timestamps. And then just by applying heuristics on this, this can produce some false positives because like randomly 2 guys can do like opposite side trades on Polygon and Arbitrum, and that would be a match. So to minimize that, we also looked for some kind of an association between the entities. This could either be from directly the signer addresses, or it could also be from the smart contracts that they use. But of course, the risk here is that if you just look into the contracts that they interacted with, if both of them interact with Uniswap, this doesn't indicate anything. So there we apply a logic that we check that we don't know what the contract is doing. That is, it's not a labeled smart contract. We have this like list of 1.2 million contracts that we know what they're doing. And this is like a list curated of DeFi apps, non-MEV contracts, whatever. And if it's not in this, and of course, think it like this is not only on Ethereum, but we have to combine together these 9 different blockchains that we studied. So it's a long list, probably still a lower bound, but we then check if it's a contract that's not in this list, which can potentially indicate that it's a arbitrage contract and both guys are using the same arbitrage contract. The second question, what was the second question?
All right, once you've identified that this guy, this wallet is actually a successful arbitrageur, is there actually an ability to actually just, jump on board, basically
Yeah.
copy trading?
So the thing is that because most of them are not actually using smart contracts, it's hard to, like, you can't really understand their off-chain logic. But what we see is that this is not actually something we mentioned in the paper, but pretty much like that CA74 guy, all of his arbitrage are...
Why wouldn't I do exactly what CA74 does?
Yeah. So you can... So, okay. Two things. First of all these EOAs, they always use aggregators. The idea is process the signals outside, see that prices have a discrepancy, and then delegate it to aggregators, which will find you the best price. To do what CA74 does, assuming you have liquidity enough, it's still risky because, like, let's say the guy does like one leg, or there are like 4 minutes apart the two legs. Now, you see that CA74 is doing something on Polygon, and let's say you front ran him, like copied his strategy. He actually uses public mempool usually, so you can do this. But now you don't know where this is going. Like, you don't know if he's gonna profit on Arbitrum, on Binance. Maybe he's not even doing a cross-chain arbitrage. There's always that risk as well, because these guys actually are doing a lot of rebalancing as well. Because if you don't use a bridge, then your assets, like if you always do the same direction trades with this not using bridging, then you are draining your inventory over time. So you have to rebalance. And we actually found that like they most of the times rebalance like either after the arbitrage directly or like every X minutes. So it's risky to just copy because you don't know when or where the second leg is going to happen.
Hey, thanks for your nice presentation. Did you only look into these 9 blockchains, or did you also look into smaller ones? I mean, specific, when you speak about low liquidity, it's in small chains which are maybe depegging because of hack. It's a very huge possibility of arbitrage. Did you also check this?
Yeah, we didn't check any other network because the problem is that the way you identify these trade transactions are by looking at events, like swap events, transfer events, and transfer events are universal, but swap events depend on the actual DEX that emit them. And yes, on Ethereum you have these common Uniswap, like balancer events, but if you study 9 different networks, like they have different DEXs that have different signatures. We in total identified like 108 different protocols used. And now if you go into even smaller chains, you have to be aware of like what is emitting a swap and like what's an active DEX there. And we didn't go into that direction yet. But yes, that's a fair point that this stuff could also be happening on those chains, or maybe even Solana. So yeah.
I made it in June 2023.
Yeah.